Greer Hendricks obtained her master's in journalism from Columbia University and spent 2 decades as a book editor before becoming a novelist. Her writing has appeared in the New York Times, Allure, Publishers Weekly, and other publications. Together with Sarah Penkanen, she has written the New York Times bestselling novels, The Wife Between Us, An Anonymous Girl, and You Are Not Alone. Andrea Yaryura Clark grew up in Argentina amid the political turmoil of the 1970s until her family relocated to North America. After graduating from Georgetown University's School of Foreign Service, including a year of study at the Universidad de Salvador in Buenos Aires and completing her MBA at York University, she returned to Buenos Aires to connect with her roots. By the mid-1990s, many sons and daughters of the disappeared, the youngest victims of Argentina's military dictatorship in the 1970s, were coming of age and grappling with the fates of their families. She interviewed several of these children and their experiences, not widely known outside Argentina, and inspired her debut novel, On a Night of 1,000 Stars. She lives in Brooklyn with her husband, 2 sons, and a spirited terrier. I'm now going to let them take it away.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. I'm Greer.
I'm Andrea.
And you might wonder why the two of us are here together, because we have Andrea, who's written this fabulous, you guys have to, you're getting a 2-for-1 special here, because it's not just my book, but this is her book, On a Night of 1,000 Stars, that went on sale just a week ago. And so you might wonder why we're here together, but our relationship is that we have sons who are the same age, and Andrea, before she moved to Brooklyn, lived a few blocks away, and we would always run into each other. We were always late. We were always late. Our school's just a few blocks away, and we were like the stragglers, and we would walk our kids to school, and then we would walk our dogs together in the park. And during this time, I was a book editor, and Andrea was working on her debut, and we would talk endlessly about, kind of like wanting to change, for me, change careers, and her to launch. You had written your book first as a screenplay,
That's right, yes.
Yeah, and so we would talk, and we just became really good friends. And then when I published my first book, and Andrea's going to ask me more about that, she was really one of the first people I told that I wanted to write, and you told me. And so that's anyway, so we were friends first, and now and now
authors. Well, you've been an author for a long time, Greer, but I'm just so excited to have my book come out just a week before yours. And thank you so much for inviting me to this event tonight. I'm so excited to be here. So let's just jump right in. And for anyone who hasn't read The Golden Couple, I mean, it did just come out yesterday. Can you give everyone a brief summary?
Yeah, so it's, I wish we were doing this in person so I could see, I don't know how many of you have read my, other books, The Wife Between Us, Anonymous Girl, You Are Not Alone. They're all dark, twisty, psychological thrillers. And The Golden Couple is in that same genre. And to give the short version is that Avery Chambers is, she was a therapist. She lost her license, but she still counsels people with this very unusual method. It's a 10-session method, and she won't take you on unless she thinks she can fix you. So you might come to her with, a troubled marriage or issue with a boss or a mother. And if she thinks she can kind of fix you in those 10 sessions, then she'll take you on. So that's one of our main protagonists. And then the other protagonist is Marissa. And it's funny because I keep being about to call her Marina, because for the whole time Sarah and I wrote this book, her name was Marina. And then at the last minute, we changed it. And so I still slip up all the time. But anyway, her name is Marissa Bishop. And she learns about Avery's method, and she brings her husband to therapy. And this is not going to spoil anything to say he thinks that they're going in there to talk about their 8-year-old son, Bennett, who's been bullied at school. But boom, page 3, she says, "We're not here. I need to tell you something. I slept with another man." And it's like a bomb went off in that therapist's office. But the couple decides to work with Avery to try to repair their marriage, and then the story goes from there.
And excellent book. I just finished it, and I can't wait for all of you to start reading it. You're gonna love it, love it. So you mentioned earlier that you were an editor, and you were Sarah's editor before you teamed up to write together. Can you tell us how that came to be?
Yeah. So I was an editor at Simon & Schuster, and I don't even know how many years ago, let's say 14, I'll make that up, it sounds about right. I was submitted a debut by this author, Sarah Pekkanen, and I loved it, but I wasn't alone. There were a lot of other editors who wanted to acquire Sarah's first book, and I persevered, and we worked together on 7 books, because she was like a book a year author, and she wrote primarily women's fiction. And we became really close. We discovered we had a number of uncanny similarities. So we both studied psychology and journalism. We are both terrible cooks. She always says I shouldn't be revealing that, but it's true. We are both the exact same age. We both have brothers we're really close to who are both named Robert. So weird, right? So, I mean, it's funny that I'm doing this with you, because the only other person I confessed my secret about wanting to write to, besides, you know, my husband, was Sarah. After I left publishing, we had really I'd collaborated with her on a lot of her books. You know, she would come to me, and I wouldn't say collaborated, that sounds like I did more on that than I did, but I was a very involved editor. And I told her the secret that I wanted to write. And see, it could have been you, but she said to me, why don't we write a book together? And I thought, gosh, why does she want to write a book with me? She's written 7 books, and Sarah is very instinctive and intuitive. And she just said, she just had this gut feeling that we could do something really magical. So that's how things started, but should I just keep going?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to keep going, people. Because the story is, I mean, it's such a, to me, like such a magical story. But so then the question was, well, what are we going to write? And so we both went to our bookshelves and we pulled down our favorite books from the past few years. And they were all strong female protagonists. And when we talk about your book, we'll get to that too, because that's something you're really interested in too, is exploring. And they were all psychological in nature. But Sarah had primarily written like quote unquote women's fiction. And I had really, that's probably primarily what I had edited. Like I had edited Jennifer Weiner and Taylor Jenkins Reid, like women who would be kind of put in that category. But we knew we wanted to write more like a thriller or a suspense. And then the question though was, well, how are we going to do this? Because she lives in DC and she's doing another event tonight, which is why we're split up. But so she was in DC and I was in New York. And we were joking earlier with the staff at RJ Julia about tech issues. And normally, like the kids are always the ones to help, right? So my daughter, who was then 13, said, hey, Mom, there's this like newfangled technology called Google Docs and Google Hangouts. And so she set us up on Google Docs and Google Hangouts. And so that's how we wrote our first 3 books that way. And then sometimes we would go to each other's cities, like every other month, to do some plotting and bring these like giant notepads and Post-its and do our big plotting that way. So, yeah.
So you talk about, so you would get together, right? While you were writing these novels. But so then how did COVID impact your working together?
So we were on our book tour for our 3rd book, and Sarah's also very superstitious, so she hates the number 3. And it was our 3rd book, and it came out on March 3rd in
3-3.
3-3, 3rd book, March 20th.
Oh, it's a lot of 3s.
A lot of 3s. And you know, we went on our tour and every day we were like, should we still be touring? Should we still be touring? And finally we had to it wasn't safe for us or for our audience. So we canceled our tour. Luckily we had started our 4th book a little bit. And the 4th book, The Golden Couple, what's also interesting is that each book has kind of started with a different, kind of from a different point, but this book started with the title, and it was a title that our editor, did you know this? Jennifer Enderlin, my brilliant editor at St. Martin's, gave us the title and said, I think you guys could do something great with this. And so that was, so we started. Now we had been working remotely, unlike a lot of other, a lot of people. So we were familiar with the technology, but things changed. So the other thing about Sarah and I is like, we used to write every line together. Like a lot of authors, they'll alternate chapters, like, or one will take a different character. We didn't do that. We wrote everything together. COVID changed things a bit because all of a sudden she had a bunch of kids at home. I had kids at home. I had my husband around, who was like, my husband every day would make like a shake. My little office was like outside the kitchen. He'd make these blender shakes, and Sarah's kid would be going like, Mom, you know, I need lunch. It kind of put a damper on the creative process when you hear that. So we still talked endlessly about each scene and each chapter, but we did a little more individual writing. Okay, I want to put a pause because okay.
Okay, no, because okay, no, and you will in a minute, but I love how your editor threw a title at you and said, run with it. It reminds me of what it would be like to take an improv class. And it'd be like, you know, just like 2 or 3 cues, and then how the team, you know, the cast puts together this fun scene. So that's sort of reminded me of that.
Oh, I love that idea. And it's funny because it was crazy that no one had ever used that title before. Like, it's such a good title, I think.
Yes,
so
it is.
And we learned.
So you did a search, and there was like,
there was nothing there. And then we came up with the idea for Avery very quickly. We knew there had to be like a golden couple, so that is Marissa and Matthew Bishop. But we came up with Avery. So, I mean, what I love this book because it combines my favorite topics, which are complicated marriages, kind of like The Wife Between Us had a complicated marriage, and therapy. With anyone here who read An Anonymous Girl, there was also, you know, a very I was going to say mischievous, but not really mischievous, more of she was a complicated therapist. And so Avery is really a maverick. And so it's just so fun to explore these topics. But that 10-session method was like, we just knew that was what she was going to do.
Brilliant.
I mean, okay, let me ask you this. Someone says to you, would you go see a 10-session therapist?
Oh, yes. Right. It's like the miracle, you know, pill in a way, because therapy can take years, right, to fix anything, whatever you have going on in your life. So if somebody came up to me and said, I can fix whatever's wrong in your marriage in 10 sessions, I would totally sign up. So it's a great premise. And
she's invasive, though. I think what I didn't really get at in the beginning was like, she wants complete access to your life. So you really have to be willing to, you know, kind of turn that over to her. So,
right. No, but I you know, people watch a lot of reality TV. I don't know. I feel like that you would get a lot of people interested, and they would be comfortable with having you into their house because, you know, that does happen.
This is hold on, everybody.
Okay,
I think we just came up with a great idea. A reality TV show with a therapist.
10 sessions.
10 sessions.
It's a 10 episode limited.
Right.
You know.
Well, I mean, of course we want that for our book.
Yes.
But make it a reality show. People are Love is Blind, all these things.
Yes.
Oh God, I wish I could see everybody. Who thinks this is a good idea?
Oh, there's like, you can raise your hand.
Can they raise your hand? As nobody's raising their hand. Are we just like, we haven't even been drinking yet.
Okay, but so you were mentioning how COVID made it harder to maybe get the creative juices flowing because there were interruptions. And so I want to ask you about that. I mean, how would you handle your creative differences? If there were any, and from one book to the next, have you learned how to better manage that?
Well, people always want to know if there's like a cat fight or something. I feel like, but Sarah and I we have a million mottos. So we have like better together because we never could have written any of these books alone. Like they're so dark and twisty that we always joke we've got like one brain, but we need both our brains to keep track of all the twists and turns. And one of our other mottos is if it's not working for one of us, it's not working for both of us. And so there's, option A, option B, and then there's C, and usually C or D or E or F is better. And we just talk and talk and talk endlessly. Like another one of our sayings is like, what if? We're like, what if, this, and we egg each other on. But yeah, it's a collaboration, but I think we knew pretty early on that our narrative instincts, our editorial instincts were very similar, and we wanted to tell similar stories. So whether you're debating, neither of us has an ego about whether it's, brown eyes or blue eyes or, stuff like that. So in You're Not Alone, Sarah felt like we were kind of cheating at one point and giving in giving something kind of playing with some names in a way that she felt was a little like cheaty, and our editor actually didn't have an issue with it, but it kept nagging at Sarah. And so I was like, you know what, we'll just figure it out, we'll fix it. And like the end of The Wife Between Us, we redid that ending multiple times to make sure that it satified both of us.
Okay. Oh, good. So
yeah,
you really did work together.
Oh yeah, I mean, yes.
I mean,
so,
clearly, you know,
yeah.
these fabulous results.
Yeah.
All those novels have been wildly successful, Greer. And some, well, have all of them been optioned? I know you had some of these projects have been optioned for film, TV. Can you give us an update on these projects, which is the holy grail for many authors?
It's the holy grail, but it's also, we're very realistic that so few, like when I was an editor, a lot of my authors' books were optioned and nothing happened. And then some did, like, you know, Jennifer Weiner's In Her Shoes, which for anyone who hasn't seen that movie, they did a great job with that movie. I edited The Perks of Being a Wallflower, but he ended up adapting Steve Chbosky. But it's hard. It's, you know, hard. But our first book actually sold on a partial manuscript to our editor. And I think that's because Sarah, you know, had written 8 books or 7 at that time. And I was an editor, and we ended, the partial was on that big twist, which for anyone who hasn't read it, I'm not going to spoil it, but there's a big twist at the end of part 1, as you know. And so it sold on that partial and then an outline, and then it leaked to film agents. And so it was actually bought for film before we had finished writing the book.
Oh,
did
wow.
You know
I did not know that. That's so exciting.
It was. So it sold to Steven Spielberg's Amblin Entertainment, but then it's a hard book to adapt. And so when Sarah and I were on tour for our, oh boy, I think it was our second book, we literally, and when you go on tour, okay, so for anyone, I mean, in the good old days when you actually used to go on tour, you know, pack a suitcase and you never checked your bags because you were, and if you lost your, you know, you're going from city to city. So we get a call that one of the heads of Amblin wants to meet with us, and we fly into LaGuardia, and we're standing in like the bathroom stalls, holding up like our outfits, like, does this stain look too bad? Is this too wrinkled? Like, we're going to meet with this woman, and we're meeting her at the Ritz, and we didn't really know what she wanted, but we sit down with her, and she says, she's like, we've been having trouble finding someone to adapt your, you know, adapt the story. A lot of people have had a take, but it hasn't worked for us. Would you guys be interested? And so well, Sarah's always like, you know, like I said before, she goes with her instincts, and I'm like the more cautious one. And I was like, we need to think about it. And Sarah's like, are you crazy? Of course we're going to do this. So we did a pitch. We had to pitch them.
Oh, wow.
And we didn't know how to do a pitch. So we looked up, like, you know, Google, our best friend, Google how to write a pitch, and we pitched it to Amblin, and they accepted it. And so we wrote a screenplay. They were really kind. They told us to tear it apart and do it all over again. And it keeps being, they have, I mean, I don't know what will happen, but they keep renegotiating so that it's it's still there. And then the 2 other projects were optioned, but the options have lapsed. Anybody out there, if you're interested? And then fingers crossed, there is probably some good news on this one. So yeah. So, okay, can we just pause?
Not surprised. Okay.
Now I want to ask you. Okay, for anyone who has not read Andrea's book yet, why don't you give your synopsis?
Okay. So my book has 2 storylines. The first one takes place in the 1970s in Argentina, in the years leading up to the 1976 military dictatorship. And it involves 2 students who are in university, and there's a love story against the backdrop of this political turmoil that's happening in the country. And the second narrative takes place in 1998 specifically, and it begins in New York, and it's through the eyes of Paloma, and she'll tell us her story that will take her to Argentina with her parents, who are Argentinian, and where she's going to seek some answers about her family.
So I read a very early draft of Andrea's book when when she was, you know, still, you know, you were in your, you know, the beginning stage.
Very beginning, yes.
And you revised this so many times. And in the first draft that I read, it only took place in the 1920s
98.
98.
Yeah, or
And
maybe
it didn't have,
yeah.
yeah, it was
around
just
then.
the 1990s.
Right.
And then, so can you explain to people, because I bet you there's at least some people out there who, you know, want to write books, and to then decide, like, how did you then decide to shift it and make it into two time periods?
So yes, the original manuscript with all the rewrites that it had was really focusing just on Paloma's story in the 1990s with very brief flashbacks to the 1970s. I would say maybe a total of 10 pages.
That's crazy.
So, because, you know, so there was the story that she, you know, this story that she was trying to figure out about that takes place in the 70s, but it really just had these flashbacks. And through some great readers who gave me their feedback, it just made sense for me to really do a deep dive into the 70s. That basically meant tossing out a lot of what I'd written in, well, I'll consider contemporary, although it takes place in 1998. It really reads like contemporary fiction. So yeah, I basically rewrote the whole novel in a way. Half the novel was new. But that, I'll say, because I already had the outline, so to speak, of what the arc of the story was going to be. It was just, I don't know, just sort of flowed easily, more easily. And I was able to, after I did a lot of research, I sat down and wrote it. It didn't take me that long as the whole 1990s part did.
I think as a writer, a lot of what you don't put on the page, it informs every decision that you make. So you may not know that somebody, you know, for lunch would eat 7 almonds and, you know, asparagus or something wacky or whatever. That might not ever come out, but you know all those details. So you knew inside out the history, but you had to still have to do a lot of research. I mean, right?
Yes, I did. And because it's, you know, I've already had some really great reviews and people talking about this issue that they did not know. So this is not familiar. So anyone who's listening to us tonight, watching us, who reads it, you probably won't be familiar with the story, which is why I also felt compelled to write this. It was in my head for so many years. I'd moved back to Argentina. I spent my childhood there and I moved back after college. And anyway, so it was just, I was intrigued by what had happened to the children of all these people that went missing during the dictatorship. And when I moved back to New York, the story stayed with me and I thought I just need to write it. Anyway, there's not much, you can't read books in English about it. So I was asking for help from my cousin. For example, she sent me books. So I was reading a lot of the stuff in Spanish, but it wasn't a history that was even being taught in high schools.
Wow.
So, but I'm grateful to the journalists who did do all this work.
That's incredible. I mean, I knew nothing, but I didn't know. I didn't know if I was just. I didn't know if I was just really ignorant because you know. But that's why. And I will say this: I pay it the highest compliment by saying that it was educational. That I learned a lot, but it's a total page turner. Like you've got those short chapters, and also sometimes when you're reading books into either two time periods or two perspectives, you're like kind of more invested in one than the other. But every time I left like Santiago's story in the 70s, I was like, oh God, wait, but I don't want to leave. But then I'd get to Paloma and I'd be like, oh wait, now I'm with Paloma. So I just could. I mean, literally, I read it in 2 days. The new version. So I couldn't put it down. So because it really does have that propulsive quality to it, but yet you feel like you're smart when you're reading because you're learning something. So
what I did, for me, what was more interesting was how against this backdrop, this political turmoil and eventual violence, was how do people go about their daily lives? And so I was really focusing more on this. There's a love story and different people coming at life from different lenses. I don't know. So I was just really looking at the stories, and I'm glad the history, I was able to weave it in organically. I don't know, but to me, it's really more of a love story than like, I don't know, but so
yeah.
But maybe it is both. I don't know.
It's a parent-child story. It's a love story. Like it's kind of got something for everyone. And did you know what the end all along was going to be? As people ask me that a lot. Did you know how it was going to end?
Well, because it is historical fiction, I sort of wanted to mirror a little bit about what did actually happen.
Right.
But in terms of the family and Paloma, no, that had some different approaches towards the end.
Yeah.
How did you were talking about your was it The Wife Between Us? You said you rewrote many different endings.
Well, we had it's funny, when we pitched it and sold it to Hollywood, we had an ending. And then we spoke to a lot of these Hollywood people, and they kind of had a little bit of a different take on what the ending should be. And then we wrote an ending that was actually a lot softer than we ended it. Well, I'm not going to say, but it was a much softer ending. And then when we sent it to our editor, she was like, wait, what about the ending that I bought this to have? And so then we went back. So yeah, so it shifted back and forth.
That's right, because you sold it to Hollywood a partial manuscript, which is unbelievable. That's unheard of. So
I know, but it had that big, it had the big twist. It had
that,
it has a commercial, whatever, it was commercial.
Right.
So yeah. So that was, but yeah, I think that's an interesting question for like a lot of writers. And then are you more of like, the question of like, are you a plotter or a pantser? Do you know that expression?
No,
but can
no,
you? Oh, okay.
You're gonna be, so how does this work?
Yes, debut author. This is a question you will be asked a lot, which is
good
like,
to know.
okay, do you plot your stories outline, or are you more like kind of like wing it as you're writing?
Can I say I do both?
Yes, I think that's probably the most common answer, but yes. Okay.
Because I did have to have an outline. Yeah. It helped. I'd done it. I'd had this screenplay from long ago that I turned to. It served as like a very informal, I don't know how you say, like loose outline, but then I moved on from there. With the 1970s, because I had historical events sprinkled throughout that. Yeah. So I had to make sure, you know what I mean? So like I have like a big protest that I have a kidnapping happened that were based on true events. Yeah. So that part was plotted. Yeah. And then even a concert that they go to. So there's real things that are happening. Yeah. And then I would bring in like my characters and see how are they going to react? How are they going to evolve around, around these events?
I feel like it's like kind of like you're on a road trip and you knew you were going to stop in certain places. You had to stop there, but you didn't exactly know the road you were going to take to get there.
Yes, that's exactly. Right? And that's what made the journey fun.
Yeah.
Oh yes. Yeah. Once I knew, okay, this is where I have to go from A to B, but how am I going to get there?
Right. Yeah. Am I going to take the windy road or the straight road?
And honestly, the characters would tell me how to do it, where to go and what they were going to do.
And did you have, so there's some, very troubling scenes, harrowing scenes in your book. How do you turn that off at the end of the day?
I wouldn't. I mean, I would. First of all, it was really hard to write them.
Yeah. So
I would sort of skip, and then I with a nudge, maybe from my editor, saying, "No, can we? Andrea, we have to see a little more." So, so first of all, I was sort of avoiding it, and then once I did, I came to writing later in life. Yeah. I didn't grow up thinking I wanted to be a novelist. And I had worked in music for a long time. I worked at Tower Records. Yeah. We had a Tower Records in Argentina. I worked in television, like MTV, but it was called Much Music. So I was always working in music, and that to me is like, it just nourishes my soul. It makes me feel better. It transports me. So if I needed to feel like kind of get out of that funk that, when you write hard scenes, because you've had them too in your books. Yeah. Music saves me.
Interesting. And do you write with music?
Yes. Not all the time, but to get me in the right mood. If I have to go back in time, I'll listen to like 70s music from Argentina. It reminds me of my childhood.
And what about you? Because you were finishing your book when you had a full house. How did you juggle that? Because you had, so for many years, your kids were off at school and your husband was off at work, and it was just you and Toby, the adorable dog. Yes. So were you able to just close the door and get work done, or was that hard?
Yes, I've definitely had to toss my cell phone out, and we were all reading the news, weren't sure what was going to happen. Yeah. So it was a hard time to focus. Yeah. Luckily at that point I was already deep in, I don't know. But yeah, I was probably listening to more music then, or even wearing AirPods if I didn't have a quiet space. Yeah. But I have to say, one of the silver linings of everyone being at home was able to hear my kids you know, on Zoom for their classes. I don't know, there were nice little breaks that I got from the writing. I enjoyed that. And I'm a little bit maybe like John, who's like making the shakes or like, and
that's my husband.
Yeah, and you're like, I mean, I don't know if I'm a great cook, but I also find it therapeutic to cook. So I was doing that too, and enjoying it. And that's how I'd also get myself away from the book. And
right. Interesting. That's so not the way that I would ever take a break.
What would you do as a break? What do you do?
I mean, I'm a runner, so I exercise, I'm walking, and I mean, and it depends on the season where I am, but I find a lot of times when I'm running or walking, I get a lot of breakthroughs in my thoughts about, you know, characters or plot. And so I'll either text myself or I'll text Sarah. I'll be like texting her things, and she somehow seems to understand, you know, it's like blue, you know, flower. And she's like, yes, blue flower. I know exactly what that means. So just things come to you. But
if you don't write them down, you lose them immediately. Does that happen to you?
Immediately.
It happens to me.
And at night, I really need like a notepad, because it's not great to start typing in your phone, but sometimes I do that too, because I have a lot of thoughts at night. Yeah, you think it's like the greatest idea in the world, and then it's gone because you're just like, you're like, oh,
because you didn't write it down. You definitely need to keep a notepad. It's when you least expect it. Those who are watching tonight, you might know what we're talking about. It comes to you in unexpected moments, especially when you're trying to solve a puzzle.
My watch, by the way, I'm looking at my watch because it keeps saying that I'm exercising, but I'm like, this is not exercise. So
this has been fun. It's great.
I know.
So can you tell us what you're working on next, Greer?
I
know your book just came out.
I know, no pressure. Jeez, you sound like my family. My family's like, chop, chop. When's the next book coming? Well, I mean, I have another book. You know, Sarah and I are under contract for another book, but we're actually both also working on individual projects, which I can't really talk about, but I'm very excited about it. And I know I have to do a shameless plug. I've also started a newsletter, so which you can find. Go to my website, greerhendricks.com, where I'm giving. It's called Sincerely Greer Reads, Writes, and Recs, and I'm giving recommendations like podcasts or wildcard, you know, things or books and TV shows, because I think like one thing I missed from corporate publishing was that, like, seeing people in that water cooler talk of like, you know, what are you listening to? What are you doing this? So that I'm hoping people will actually write back to me and tell me like what they're, you know, interested in. I think some of that was like the pandemic too, like we were so much more isolated, and then you left me, like we used to be just a few blocks away. So.
Walk our dogs together and discuss our, you know, what we're up to, everything, kids, husbands.
Yeah, it's the power of female friendship, I think. So, I mean, that's we were Andrea and I were at an event last night, and it was International Women's Day, and it was mostly filled with women, and there's something about like women lifting up women, and you know, both of us started these careers, you know, we're not spring chickens.
Yeah, we're not. No, we're not.
And just to have that kind of courage. So again, like for anyone, you know, out there, like pursue your dream and make it happen. You know, you really can. It might take a long time. You know, people think they're like, oh, you were an overnight success. Well, I was a publisher. I was an editor for 20 years. Like that, I was learning by every author that I worked with. I learned from each and every one of them something. So. Right. Yeah.
A friend told me the other night, well, we were also having an event because my book came out last week. Yeah. And because, as you said, like I started later, she said about me that I'm a reader who became a writer. Yeah. And I really like that. And that's exactly what it happened, because I didn't take creative writing. Anyway, again, for people who are wondering or would like to pursue something outside of what their regular job is or what they're doing at home, you know, go for it. Yeah. And I love reading, and I think that's how I learned. So you were learning from your authors, and I guess I was learning from the authors I love and read.
Yeah. I mean, obviously I was a big reader too, but I also learned a lot from like kind of what, you know, not to do, right? Editing, you know, just
which is why maybe it took me so many years. That's the other thing. It was kind of like being in an MFA, whatever, for like years. And I was learning what not to do when I would have a reader come back with their feedback.
But it's intimidating also when you read you know, so many of the people we read, you know, so many books out there. I mean, it's intimidating because they're done, but people don't know how many drafts it took for any author to get to where they're going. It comes out, you guys read it and it seems perfect, but oh my God. They're awful. I mean, some of them, I mean, mine were awful. Some of the drafts were really bad.
Well, one of the things that I wanted to mention is that, yes, I did have to throw away a lot, but it all was like backstory, say for like Paloma, or even some of the characters that are still in the book. They're minor characters, and I had to really trim down what they were their place in the book. But those stories have now stayed with me and are maybe going to be used in my next writing project. So I don't consider any of that a waste.
Yes.
You know, it all serves a purpose.
Absolutely.
Even if it's not for the one that you're currently working on.
Yeah. I mean, my third book with Sarah, we threw out 200. We started writing a book. It was set in a very isolated kind of resort, retreat, more like a retreat. And it just wasn't working. And we got to like page 200 and every day, and we don't have writer's block. We don't allow ourselves to have writer's block. And every day we're like, what's the next best scene we want to write? And we couldn't think of it. And so we finally realized we had like boxed ourselves into such an isolated setting, we had nowhere to go. And we threw out those pages, we moved that book to New York, and it just opened up the whole story. But the germ of that idea became, we did an Audible short story, and we ended up using kind of an isolated retreat setting, and it worked perfectly for a little short story. We just couldn't build a book around it.
Loved it. Listened to it with my family on a car trip, and everybody loved it. So I highly recommend it. Remind me the title.
Oh my God.
Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
Because we've called it so many things. Oh my God, the Getaway. I think it was The Getaway. Oh my God.
Good. So good. If you have a road trip coming up, that's the one to download.
Well, it's short. I'm not sure I wouldn't say it's our best, but it's short. It's fun. It's fun.
So fun.
It's fun. It was fun. So, should we open up for questions? I don't even know. My watch just keeps telling me I'm exercising, but I don't even know what time it is.
And I've tossed my cell phone far away, so I don't know what time it is either.
Oh, well, maybe we just keep talking.
Okay.
Okay. So we do have a few audience questions.
Okay. Great.
Okay. First, what is your writing process like?
Is this for me or for both of us?
For both of you.
Okay. What's the right? Well, I mean, for me with Sarah, we get up at 9 and then, well, we get up earlier, but we start talking at 9, and we always have to talk about what's going on in our lives for a little while, because that really informs our writing day. Like if one of us is struggling with, a kid or a parent or, boyfriend, husband, whatever it is. So we kind of jibber jabber, get that out. And then we would talk about the scene that we, what this is like if we're in the middle of a project, we talk about the scene that we're going to write about, and then we would hunker down to work, and we would work from 9 to 3 on that. I'll just talk about the first 3 books, really 9 to 3, Google Docs, Google Hangouts, no camera because it's very distracting to look at yourself all day long. And we would try to write a scene and then think about the next scene that we're going to write our scenes are short. We'd try to think about the scene that we're going to tackle the next day. That would be like a good rhythm for us when we were like kind of in a flow. What about you?
Well, I start my day a little later than Greer and Sarah. And I like to walk my dog, and maybe that's my way. Like I start the day like that, and I'll listen maybe to an Audible book or just music. And then once, I sometimes have to trick myself into getting to my desk. So I won't have my first, I drink mate, which is Argentine tea. And I love that. But I won't start drinking it until I'm at my desk. So it's like holding off on doing that. And then what I like to do, and it's something that I'm pretty sure Ernest Hemingway was like, have those quotes. It's like, don't leave your typewriter or your notebook when you know what you're going to write the next day. Something along those lines. And that really works for me. Yeah. So that I know I can have something to come back to the next day. Yeah.
That's a little bit like us talking about the scene that we want to tackle, because because we have that, then it's like percolating overnight, and you make those connections.
Yes. Yeah. And then at least, you have something you can write instead of coming to your desk and just sort of staring at the the screen or the notepad. I don't work as long as you do. I can't work for more than 2 hours. And again, like I told you, I like to cook. I even like to do laundry. I don't know, it's weird. I'm weird that way, but those are like 40-minute increments in some way, like putting in a load. And so I know I only have to be at my desk for 40 minutes because then I have to go and do something. So that's another way of disciplining myself.
It's different when you're collaborating with somebody, because it's more just like tonight, like flies by. I just think there's just more, I think when, like writing when you're solo, I would imagine it's just different. So.
But definitely the morning is for me the most productive time of the day. But then, like we were talking about how when you're walking or you're doing something completely different from the writing and an idea will pop into your mind, I'll run over and write it down in my computer, and then maybe I'll sit down again for another hour. So that's an exciting time.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
When you're like, the ideas are flowing.
Yeah.
All right. What kind of research do you do before writing, and how long do you usually do research for?
I mean, my books don't really have a ton of research. So I would say there's a lot of brainstorming that goes into an idea before Sarah and I would sit down to write. I mean, we would talk endlessly about the characters and the setting and different plot twists. The research sort of would often come about during the writing. Like, for example, like in Anonymous Girl, one of my favorite parts was we sprinkle some psychological studies throughout the book. And I loved doing the research for that. And then for You Are Not Alone, each chapter for our main character, Shay, there's a data nugget, because for a long time she didn't have a name. Her name is Data Girl, and because she sees the world through data. And so that was also really fun to find data that informed each chapter. But that's just like little bits. Like you had a lot more research to do.
I did. But I was doing it also at the same time as I was writing. Research, well, just from my having lived in Buenos Aires in the 1990s, I sort of knew already a lot, but it was, going back to the 1970s that required more research. And I wouldn't let that hinder if I was writing, then I would go back to make fact check and make sure that I had my dates right, or, I don't know. So it was a little bit back and forth. Now in my second book, I'm spending probably too much time doing research, not wanting to sit down. I mean, I hear that about people who write, they just get so caught up in the research, they don't know when enough is enough, and when they actually have to sit down. I'm having a little bit of that right now.
One of my favorite, she's a friend, but also someone I edited and is a brilliant writer, Gretchen Rubin, who writes, she wrote The Happiness Project, but she says research is me search. And I think that's true, right? You can really spend endless amounts of time. I mean, and she also says, and I think this is true too, that you can spend that, like, work can be the greatest procrastination of all, right?
I like that one. Yeah.
Right. So we all know that.
Okay. Do you write your characters with specific people in mind?
No. None of my characters are specific people. I did think there was an actress for one of my books who I pictured the entire time. But that's the only character ever. Like normally after I think about it, like now I look back at The Wife Between Us and I was like, I would love Margot Robbie to be the star of that, or I would love this person. But the whole time I was picturing an Anonymous Girl, there was a character I pictured looking like a young Nicole Kidman. So, but I'm not giving away which character it is. So what about you?
No. I mean, I have some real figures because of the historical fiction, like of the president of Argentina, and some like one character who I base on somebody who was in the armed forces, but because it's fiction, I was able to do whatever I wanted. So I would say a couple of characters were maybe inspired by some of the people I met, but no, they're all fictional.
Okay. How long on average does it take you to write a book?
Well, in my case, I only have one.
On the average
years.
Oh, I mean, for Sarah and I would say it's about a year for each book. I mean, give or take, more like a little over a year, I'd say. This year, there was 2 years in between our books because we were so delayed on the third book. It sort of slowed everything down for the fourth. And then we really wanted, with COVID and everything, we wanted a lot of time to set this book up. So this book, actually, we finished writing it a year ago, and they've just been, so my publisher has just been spending all this time doing incredible promotion for it. So, but it's fun. Like I like the buildup. I love the whole publishing process. And I don't know if that's because, I was an editor. So I find it endlessly fascinating. Like when every part of it, like when they send me, a cover, when they tell me about the marketing or all of that, because it's like my business brain is on with all of that as well.
So it doesn't get old with your fourth? No, it's always.
No, it's always like when I opened the box of books, and I still it was more beautiful than I had.
Yeah. That's our turn.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's more beautiful than I had even imagined. And it's just so elegant, and it looks different than all my other books, but, and yours too, but you only have the ARC. You only have your advanced reader's copy, but that's okay. This is still what the cover looks like, but it's so beautiful.
Yeah. I love the cover.
Show and tell.
Yeah. And I was able to be involved in, suggesting initially what they first said, send us, artwork or anything that you think would help our creative director. I thought that was a great exercise.
Yeah. And also, what you should talk about your title, because unlike we had our title all along, from our editor, but yours, you had you went through a lot of titles.
Okay, well, because the one that you read, it was Southern Cross, and you're like, Andrea.
Oh God, that was awful. Then there was the Ambassador's Daughter.
And then unlike the Golden Couple, there's several books out there called The Ambassador's Daughter. And then, so when you read the book, you'll see there's several. I mean, first it's called On a Night of 1,000 Stars, and in Argentina, there's these huge skies, big skies, and you can see the stars in a way that you can't. And,
it's a perfect title. I liked The Ambassador's Daughter. I remember when you gave it out, but this is actually a better title.
Oh, welcome. I'm so glad to hear that.
Yeah, I think, my humble opinion.
So Andrea, you kind of already answered my follow-up question, but Greer, how involved are you with getting the cover art of your book and kind of deciding what's on there?
Yeah. Well, so for The Wife Between Us, I had no idea how they were going to design that cover. And literally one day our editor called and she's like, I have a cover for you. And she sent us one cover. Can I'm just doing show and tell about it because it is, it's the perfect cover for this book. And it looked exactly like this. We didn't make a change. It was perfect. I burst into tears. I was so happy. And then, because this book did really well, they kept this is fun having show and tell here at people. They did that kind of looked the same, similar. And then they moved on and whatever. Anyway, the third book kind of looked similar, but it kind of got a little diluted then. Oh God, I'm not in my pajama pants or sweatpants. What I sit up we're so used to do. And then for this book, we wanted a different look, but nobody's ever really, asked us to send things. And I think for you, because Argentina and it made more sense to send, to give them more of a feel for it.
Yes.
But it took us a lot of, incarnations to get this. The first few covers were really different, and none of them really worked. They sent us 4 or 8 or something, and I was just God, I kind of like this element of this and this of this, but once you start doing that, it becomes like Frankenstein, I think, and that's a little bit what was happening. It just wasn't working, and then our editor Jen was like, don't even worry about it. We've got something else, and it's great. And then they sent us that, and it was just beautiful.
I love it. Okay, so for a final question, it's one of our favorites here at RJ Julia. What are you both reading right now?
Oh, good. That's funny. because I was going to actually ask you that. So should I go?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I just finished On a Night of 1,000 Stars, so of course, but I tend to try to, when I'm working on something new, I really try to stay out of my genre because it's way too intimidating. So the last 2 books I read were actually both nonfiction. I read Crying in H Mart. I know I'm slow to the table on that beautiful memoir, and then An Invisible Child, which is all about a family who's really growing up in poverty in New York City. It is not an uplifting book. It's narrative nonfiction. The reporter did such an incredible job with access to this family, and it was heartbreaking and just had such insight. And, you know, as a New Yorker, I just felt like I saw a whole different world.
Dasani was
Dasani,
the girl.
yeah.
I remember reading the series in the New York Times.
Yeah. But the book, I thought maybe I would have felt like I already knew the story, but it's incredible.
Okay, I'm gonna write that down. I want to read it. So I just finished The Golden Couple and loved it. Please buy it now. I don't know how you guys are gonna organize that if you can click on something. But
run, don't walk.
Yeah. And I read several books at the same time, but I did start just also a couple of days ago, another friend of mine, John Avlon, who is on CNN. He's a political analyst. He finished the book called Lincoln, The Fight for Peace.
Okay.
And you think, okay, what else can you write about Abraham Lincoln?
Yeah.
But he covers the last few weeks of his life. And I just finished the introduction. It's so compelling. John writes it's nonfiction, but he writes in a way that just makes you want a page to turn, turn the page and continue reading. So I'm really enjoying that one.
Wait, it's so funny. I feel like we're both reading these really serious, like nonfiction books, which is, you know, I'll tell you what's next up on my list though to read is John Searle, speaking of John, has a new book out that I'm really eager. I don't know if he's doing an event with you guys, but he's so great. And he hasn't written a new book in like 8 years, and he's just the funniest, great guy. So I think it's called The Last Affair or Her Last Affair.
Oh, okay.
So that's next up for me.
Okay.
Something fun.
Very nice. Okay. Well, thank you both to Greer and Andrea. It's been such a lovely hour with you. As always, do not forget to purchase a copy of The Golden Couple and On a Night of 1,000 Stars. There are links in your chat box. You can easily click on those to purchase it. Or again, you can come visit us in store. Thank you both again, and I hope everyone has a great rest of their night.
Bye. Thank you. Thanks.
So fun.
Bye.